Now, this webinar is a very special one, not only because it's the last one of the series, but also because it brings all of it full circle from our very first webinar, which was around regenerating relationships, especially within ourselves and also with the environment. And now we're concluding with the importance of food sovereignty and the power of food to bring people together and to preserve history and culture. We have a wonderful group of speakers tonight. So we're going to be due for a treat. And you'll be able to find all webinar recordings on our website, along with all the other material. This campaign was possible thanks to the support of Agriculture and Agri-Foods Canada. And of course, all the farmers, partners, and individuals who made this project possible. Now let's welcome Angel Beyde, who's going to be our wonderful facilitator for tonight, and it's going to be leading this conversation with so much heart, as she always does, and we'll be introducing our speakers as well. So thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ellie. It's a great pleasure and honor to have been able to host a few of these conversations in what has been a really inspiring and moving series. I'm really glad to be part of this conversation this evening, Regenerating Our Roots. I'm calling in today from my little farm, which is in Crawford Purchase territory, otherwise known as Eastern Ontario. This is the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Kanien'kehá:ka, Mohawk, and the Wendake and Yonwetsio peoples. I feel very inspired to be able to introduce to you Sun Shan and Emily Morris this evening and hear a little bit about their journeys in regenerative food and community building. First, Sun Shan was born in Beijing, China, and now lives in Ottawa, where she's an urban farmer and an educator with a vast biology and ecology background. In 2015, Sun Shan founded Chi Garden with her partner Li Bo, I think is on the call this evening, bringing to the field over 20 years of experience working as a biomedical researcher, a conservation biologist, a nonprofit leader, a sustainability educator, and a cultural community interpreter. Her small ecological farm is cultivated as a place for diverse vegetables and herbs, community conversations around food, and connected traditions. Sun Shan is a member of the National Farmers Union and its BIPOC group, and is an organizer for the East Asia Earth Village, where a diaspora of producers and creators from East Asia connect and co-create. So without further ado, I would like to turn over the floor to Sun Shan. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel. Thank you, friends. I am quite nervous and excited to be here at the same time to be speaking about a passionate endeavor that me and my partner and our now 16-year-old son have started together about 10 years ago. And so there are a lot of discussions before this session, but I think as a member of the BIPOC community, the word rerouting, uprooting culture and mycelium especially is dear to my heart. And today I have been calling Algonquin, Ottawa home for the past 7 years, where Chi Garden Ecological Farm and Fermentation Kitchen is located at the Just Food Community Farm, about 13 kilometers east of the Parliament Hill. And today, if I can have the next slide, please. Because my son and I have been on a learning trip away for spring break. Today, I come to you at the from the traditional territory of the Lenape people, also known as Manhattan. And everywhere I travel, I try to get to know the indigenous plant locally And here is a picture from the Lenape Center, which I truly encourage everyone to visit. If you visit New York City, the sassafras leaf, which is a traditional healing plant, and as it's simple for the center, and the enormous work it is doing to really address the extremely underaddressed, underrepresented issue, like most people who come to travel in this part of the world do not get to learn about the history. Next slide, please. Our small farm is called Tea Garden, and it is rooted in the traditional wisdom that farming is a form of art. Li Bo, my partner, both life and farming partner, is holding up this calligraphy art, and the word means agriculture, means growing, farming. The origin of the word, the word actually means art, but the origin of art comes from growing. So it is, as you can see in the oracle bone, the centerpiece, people cultivating, growing, nurturing a plant. And that is the origin of art. Art comes from agriculture. So growing, relearning that ancient art of growing and believing that food is medicine is at the root of our small garden. We started in 2015 in Bruce County on the beautiful lakeshore of Bruce County, lakeshore of Huron, the traditional territory of Sogino Ojibwe nations, and moved in 2017 to Algonquin, Ottawa. We, at the beginning, didn't have much background in growing, so it was a big learning journey. And we're very thankful to many kind people, families, including Eugene and Anne Bourgeois, who hosted us for our first 2 important years of learning how to farm. And because we had many weeds growing in our field in the first few years, and still we do, we recognize many of them as actually traditional vegetables and herbs and food that's coming from all kinds of origins. From that year onward, we decided to continue allowing some of these weeds to grow in our no-till garden system and harvest them, forage them, encourage them even to grow, so that we harvest a very early salad from May until all the way to November, sometimes into December. And we call this diversity salad. And every week it has 15 plus vegetables. And you may recognize some of these vegetables in your garden, and they, when coming together, they're amazing mix. I think the Regeneration Canada, when hosting an event at Just Food Community Farm last year, also featured our salad. It's celebrating traditions from different places, really breaking boundary about what we consider as food and what is appropriate way of farming. And doing this in an ecological way is also especially beneficial. It allows us to extend seasons. It allows us to have nutrients from all of these different sources. Next slide. At the Tea Garden, we grow our garden quite ecologically. This is one of our polyculture system, imitating Three Sisters garden with sunflower as the trellis, squash on the ground, and this beautiful bean. The beans are originated from the Americas. It thereafter went around the world in northeastern China, Siberia, and Korea region. This bean developed into a really tender, mostly for the pod, creamy and also very meaty is one of the many varieties of beans, but this is one of the best performer in our garden, and it's one of our best selling products. So the Three Sister Garden really have a new life in our space. We have other species of melon, squash, gourd, and summer squash also growing in this space. They come from all kinds of traditions. We have bitter melon, which is traditionally considered a medicinal plant, both in the by the African diaspora and Asian, many Asian countries. Loofah, that is not just good for doing your bath, but the young loofah is edible and has a tremendous benefit cleansing you from inside out. Opal is gourd squash, a gourd melon, and spaghetti squash and tromboncino squash. And the tromboncino is in the same, it's the same species as the butternut squash, but it is developed into this really generous gift that grows in abundance, and it can be cut and grow back, not grow back, but cut and generate this mucus on the cut surface so it won't go moldy. One of the live demonstration of the healing power of plant. So the like all of them grow in symphony in the garden during the season in this trellis system. Hundreds of fruits come out every year just from this one system. In addition to growing these vegetables, we do a lot of fermentation, both in making and in passing on the tradition. Lacto fermentation is the art behind making kimchi, sauerkraut, and many of the lacto fermented vegetable preserves around the world. And our farm stand features more than 20 different ferments throughout the season. It helps to lock down nutrients, really using what's available locally, but borrowing a cultural tradition from many different parts of the world, but it's very much of a lost art. So we try to pass on this knowledge through training and sharing as well. At the end of every season, this is my last slide, we organize a community harvest of an indigenous plant to the North America called sunchoke, or also known as Jerusalem artichoke, which is a misnomer. Sunchoke harvest brings folks from all kinds of traditions together, but the conversation is about how can we make such a important cultural plant to be more available, as you don't find them much in the grocery stores. How can we make them more known to people, as they're very friendly for storing, for eating raw or cooked, or into fermentation. So we've been doing this in the past 4 years of our community harvest. That makes our garden that marks the end of our growing season every year, but also marks like a very animated conversation around what can be done locally in terms of our food sovereignty. I'll stop there, Angel.
Thank you. What an awesome introduction to Chi Garden. Thank you so much. Just to say that my computer crashed right after I introduced you. So if I disappear suddenly, not to worry, I'll switch over to my phone. I have it ready here with the link. Thank you so much. Emily Morris is the Operations and Environment Programs Manager at Plenty Canada, a nonprofit organization that works to unite Indigenous and Western knowledge systems through the frameworks of ethical space and two-eyed seeing, using both knowledge systems to protect the natural world and solve problems for the benefit of all. Emily comes from a French and Irish heritage and grew up mainly on the Algonquin and Mohawk territories, now known as Eastern Ontario. Her background is in environmental science and conservation, and she's been part of the Healing Place project for almost 3 years. Welcome, Emily.
Hello, thank you so much. Yeah, so I'll basically was gonna tell you guys a little bit about the Healing Place project. I do have a few of my own slides, which I will see if I can put up. I know it's always weird when you try to share the whole presentation and then share the screen.
You should have permission though, Emily, to share. Yep, perfect.
There we go. See if I can do the slideshow. Possibly. Okay, I think that's good. I think you guys can see that. All right, so the Healing Place. So we've got the name there, the Healing Place, and then the name in Mohawk, Algonquin, and French as well. So everything is in those 4 languages. And trying to skip. All right, so just as a little bit of background of how the Healing Place itself came to be, and I'll explain more what the site actually is afterwards. But this group called the Eastern Ontario First Nations Working Group is a big group that still goes on of all different organizations that work in Eastern Ontario to work on environmental issues with Indigenous communities and environmental groups working together. So Chris Craig was one of the founding members who I invited to join me here tonight, but I don't think he's available to join because he hasn't popped in yet. So unfortunately, we won't get to hear from him because he has tons of incredible knowledge. And Larry McDermott is also one of the founding members who is the executive director of Plenty Canada, so my boss. Yeah, so this is just the idea that kind of sparked the idea for the Healing Place was it came out of supposed to be a climate change carbon offsetting type of project with tree planting, and then it kind of grew into this bigger project that had a big focus on reconciliation and especially reconciliation with the land. So I can touch on this a little bit more as well later, but this explanation is kind of here as part of the story, which was that when the Healing Place project started out, you know, it was a group of all these different organizations working together, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations and people, and lots of people with different backgrounds working together. And it started to become evident that the group needed to sort of take a step back and work on governance and how exactly the group was going to work together as a partnership before continuing with the project, because the non-Indigenous partners were starting to get a little bit in a rush and working on those Western timelines and not maybe seeing the bigger picture of things. And so there was sort of a step back that happened and some training that Larry kind of offered to the whole group and everyone who was involved. That was totally voluntary, but everybody came together to do that, and everyone kind of learned together. And from that process, this was the governance that came to be put in place that the partnership was based on. So you can see that it's based on a lot of these wampum agreements, which, if you don't know, are ways that Indigenous communities make agreements, you know, have been making agreements with each other for thousands of years, and also have made agreements with non-Indigenous people as well. So with the Crown, with the government, there have been these agreements as well. Like you can see here, basing it with always doing a traditional opening, past the feather, which a lot of people are probably familiar with, flexible governance, group consensus between all the groups, and also again traditional closing. So that's just to show that the partnership didn't just come together, you know, in a in the blink of an eye. It took a lot of work to put together, and so you can see the sign here. I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but all the partners are on this sign here. So you can see there's South Nation Conservation, Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation, Plenty Canada, my organization, Forest Ontario, Shabatabajawan First Nation, Ontario Power Generation, and that's the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. And there's a whole bunch more symbolism in this sign, which you can probably tell, which was another process that took a lot of time and work to put in, to even just put the sign together. And so just, yeah, and here, kind of explaining again a little bit of the background of the site itself. So the site, the healing place, is in an area that's on both Algonquin and Mohawk traditional territories. It's an area that both nations used. It's a place where the nations may have come together and traded together. It's about an hour south of Ottawa. So it's kind of it's out in the country. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by farms. But so it's in that area north of the St. Lawrence, kind of like smack dab between the St. Lawrence River and Ottawa. So that was kind of a shared territory. And there's basically Mohawk and Algonquin nations that are in partnership working on this project. So that's something that's, I think, really interesting and special about it. And like I said before, more than, it's more than just planting or growing things. The project was always about reconciliation with each other and also with the land, air, and water. There's just a little image. Oh, I should have waited till this slide. So this is the location of where it is, just to give you an idea. And this is just kind of an outline of what the property looks like. So it was a property that was donated by someone that was an old agricultural field. And the person's house is actually still right there. So the healing place opened officially in September 2020 through reconciliation and climate change planting event. So we've just got some, yeah, so this is just a list of the initial plantation of trees that was done. So the whole site, you could see on the map, was actually quite large. So it includes the healing garden, but there's also a big area of tree planting that was done, and there's also a grassland area. So it's quite a cool site. This is a little schematic of the healing garden, the kind of main part of the site that you visit when you go there. So this is the layout of the things that have been done, and you can see there's a lot of significance into everything that was put in here, and I won't go through everything right now. But again, because it was a collaboration between Mohawk and Algonquin communities, both working on this, and different Indigenous communities often have different teachings from each other. They're not all the same. Sometimes there are similarities and things that link, and there are certain things that kind of run as themes through a lot of them. But so there are some things in here that are from Mohawk teachings. There are some things in here that are from Algonquin teachings, and some of them are teachings that are kind of found similar between them, but might have some slight differences. Like, for example, the 7 grandfather teachings is found in a lot of places. Sometimes it's called the 7 gifts or the 7 grandmother gifts. There's different names for it. You can see we've got 13 grandmother moons path, which is the 13 trees kind of in an outer ring here, the 7 grandfather teaching path. So there's 7 trees in a little inner ring here. The center has a traditional medicines garden, traditional tobacco and other things like that being grown in the center there. So you can see the butterfly here. So that's actually a Remember the Children butterfly garden, and there are some plants in there that were planted that are traditionally like children's medicines or children's plants or things that are easy for children to pick. So like strawberries is one of the main examples that's in there. Yeah, I know the butterfly is kind of upside down in that picture, but it is laid out like that. And then this kind of quadrant here is the Three Sisters garden. So we do plantings of the Three Sisters, so corn, beans, and squash. But there's also whole bunch of other foods in there. We always we do tons of tomatoes and lots of different kinds of beans. And what else did we do? I think we had potatoes and a whole bunch of different stuff in there. So that's the main food garden there. Anyway, you can see the 4 directions, that a lot of symbolic stuff there. So here's a picture of the real site. So compared to the schematic, that's what it looks like. So this picture is just from this past fall in October for our harvest event. So every fall we do a big harvest event, and we have a big community event. So people from the community come out. We usually try to get some schools out there, some school groups with some kids or teens. And we usually get them out in the spring as well to help plant. But this time we had a few high school classrooms come out with us. You can see there's all kinds of people here harvesting from the garden. And we were also filling out the rest of the butterfly garden because we had only had it partially done at that point. So you can see this part that was all grown in here. There is also sunchoke growing in the children's garden. So sunchoke, Jerusalem artichoke, or if Chris Craig was here, he would tell you that his community calls it Indian potato. So that's what they call it. But yeah, like Sun Shan said, that's an indigenous plant here and something that indigenous peoples of this area have used for a long time. Yeah, another cool thing about this site actually I don't have in this presentation, but is I think really interesting to mention, is that there's actually a stone that was found. So it was in another part of the site that's off to the side here where the tree planting was done. There was actually a grinding stone found. So a stone that indigenous peoples would use for grinding that was found on this site. So there's also like literal actual archaeological evidence of the people who, were on this land right here where we're doing this project. So that's pretty cool. Just another picture there. Oh yeah, this is actually a short little drone shot of the site, so I might as well just show that to you too. And that's just it. So it's from our same event that those pictures were from. So you can see some people were still having their lunch in the shade, and you can see it's quite an open site right now, but the whole perimeter is planted with cedar. So the idea is that eventually the cedar will grow up really large, and it'll make it a much more kind of enclosed and quiet and slightly more peaceful site because it is right on a road. So yeah, that's the long-term vision for sure. And that's the end of my presentation. So I will pass it back to Angel for now, if she's here. Yep.
Yeah, I'm here. That was wonderful. Sorry, I was keeping my video off just because my internet's been a little bit strange. That was beautiful. Thank you for your gracious continuation despite some rock and roll drop in people. Yeah, very inspiring, really, really beautiful space. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So I have a few questions that kind of proceed thematically. And the first one was something that has come up reading up about your work and speaking with you folks, which is about being rooted in and listening to the land. Everything okay? Okay. And the first question is for Sun Shan. So Shan, you mentioned braiding sweetgrass as an inspiration in your journey into growing food here and learning the land as a newcomer. Can you speak to your experience of learning to be a listener of the land and the people? That's something that comes up in braiding sweetgrass. So as a newcomer, you have had to uproot yourself and then try to replant yourself and connect to the mycelium of this place. How has the path of small-scale ecological farming supported this journey or presented its own challenges?
Thank you, Angel, for that question. And indeed, having worked prior to coming to Canada in 2014, Libo and I were on the the so-called professional environmental organizations for many years. And one of the resolutions we made about coming to Canada and starting a new life was that we want to use more hands, use heart, and to be less desk-bound, less armchair environmentalist, and more rooted in terms of physically touching the soil, hopefully growing things in the soil, and also rooted in the community. We came to Canada without much prior knowledge about the country. And of course, being new immigrants, we went through many rounds of sessions introducing Canada as a country, its economy, many aspects of community. But very, very little information during that. I think it was like less than a year when we were informed that we can come to the time of landing. During that time, very little information about, for example, the rural side of Canada, and almost none on our Indigenous people. We landed in Toronto and borrowed a place to live, and that belonged to a friend's parents. And it's in rural, it's in a small village called Mildmay. And because of these just general ideas about wanting to be rooted and wanting to understand about, what kind of community that we had come into, we took the time. Our son was 5, he was in SK, and he would go to school, and we would time our parameter and go out, for example, 2 hours to visit a place. We used a map called Bruce Gray Agriculture and Culinary Map as our guide, so that we can visit especially ecological farmers markets, places that serve local food. And of course, we also went to the nuclear visitor center that belonged to the Bruce Power, the largest nuclear plant that's in the entire world. So all of these endeavors really allowed us to understand what we would be facing as aspiring growers, farmers, but also it had linked us to people. And now looking back, we didn't know how lucky we were to have access to land only half a year after we came to Ontario. We have got to know on our way to the nuclear center, we stopped at a farm called Philosopher's Wool. And this is a social enterprise that uses Ontario local wool that otherwise is not very valuable, to weave them, to make them into beautiful locally made, locally dyed sweaters that's reminiscent of Scotland sweaters. So we ended up half a year later and started planting, plowing the land, getting ready the land at that very farm where we visited just because we got lost on our way to Bruce Power. I don't know how much of this is accidental and how much of it is just by karma, but I do know that just by continuing exploring with a intention, sometimes will land you into places that it's hard to imagine. So that's how our farming journey started. And of course, the mycelium a word that I only learned after starting farming and understanding the difference between the bacteria, those of soil, and a forest floor. All of those, I think, these were like we had little knowledge on growing, but with that sort of intention and just keep at it. I think that's how I think we were led by the mycelium to where we are today. And then you mentioned the book Braiding Sweetgrass. Oh, it's the screen kept blocking me out. Anyway, yeah, so I have, when I travel, I have both versions. Oh, this is the newly translated Chinese version and the original English version. So I read them side by side because I am really like to know that the indigenous knowledge, the indigenous practices is really being read around the world is just so encouraging. So yeah.
Thank you. That's a really beautiful and generous answer, sharing from your journey. Yeah, it's one of my favorite books as well. Emily, on the theme of being rooted in the land, I was wondering if you can speak a bit about your experience learning about healing the relationship between ourselves and the land through this work. What has been the most striking or surprising for you in the healing project as you learn from and listen to and work alongside red oaks, sugar maples, white cedar, white pine, strawberries, raspberries, currants, and tobacco, just to name some of the plant friends and family who are growing there?
Yeah, there's a lot packed onto the site. Actually, lots of plants. Yeah, I was trying to think of like my thoughts about this, and I feel like there are honestly so many things, and learning from like the indigenous people who are involved in the project, and just like their knowledge of the traditional plants, especially Chris Craig, hearing from his knowledge was always just so incredible. I think one of the things that's been interesting, and like maybe like one of the struggles with the site, so like not to sugarcoat everything, is that because it's an old agricultural site, an old agricultural field that was, I think farmed pretty heavily for a long time. It's quite a dry site. It doesn't have the best soil on the site. So I mean, regeneration is definitely like part of the work that we're trying to do there. And there have been, failures. There have been trees that didn't make it because it just turned out to be too dry for them, and we've had to replant things. But I think like slowly over the years, it's not, it hasn't been around for that long now. Like I said, it kind of opened in 2020. So even just over the past few years, there have been some improvements, like as we've been bringing more like nutrients and diversity to the site. You can see things slowly starting to improve, but it's a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. There's also tons of poison parsnip on the site, so we have to go in and really we have to do a lot of weeding every year and try to stay on top of it. So we've been trying like different ways of trying to keep that down and encourage the native plants and other things that we're planting to grow. So yeah, I mean, like the patience and the work that's involved to really sort of, yeah, I mean, regeneration is the word, like regenerating the site, and also part of that reconciliation piece, like reconciliation with the land and treating the land with love and with a relationship. I think that's really like what we're trying to do. Another interesting thing actually, which we're doing, is that there have been some like some of the tree species that have been planted have been slightly more like Carolinian type species rather than boreal species. So with climate change in mind, a lot of different people, including Indigenous people, Indigenous communities, are thinking of these sort of like assisted migration type of things where we're looking at, well, like what's the climate of this site going to be like over the next 50 years? It's going to be warmer than it was. It's not going to be the same climate going forward. So, it's a little bit of a test, like experiment site as well, because it's a pretty small site, so it's only a few trees. But yeah, that's another thing that we've been looking at, like with climate change in mind. So yeah, that's been one of the pretty interesting things as well, I think. And yeah, another thing that, just because you asked what's surprising or striking to me, this isn't necessarily maybe about the plants themselves, but because we've been making an effort to involve like local schools, bringing children and kids and teens out there to do work on the land. Whenever we've had, especially the younger kids, elementary school groups, their enthusiasm is just like so so amazing. Like when they come to plant, they're like so excited just to be like putting some little seeds in the ground. And like, I think to me, I feel like it was almost surprising at first when I first saw that, because if I had guessed before, I might have thought like, oh, like kids kids these days might not be that into that type of thing. Or at least there's most of them are probably not very experienced with, planting and growing, and for the most part, and working outside in the hot sun and stuff like that. But yeah, they've always just been so happy and so excited to be planting, and like so ready to learn. And even the teens most of the time are as well. Sometimes they're a little less open with their enthusiasm. But as long, at least when the weather is nice, because we did have one planting day where it was raining pretty badly, and they didn't seem super pumped to be there, but but yeah, for the most part, all the kids have just been like really enthusiastic to be doing something outdoors on the land, and like having that relationship with the land. So that's just been like really, yeah, I guess maybe like slightly surprising to me, but like really great. So yeah, those were kind of like a few different disjointed kind of thoughts. But
No,
yeah.
I love that. I really found like, yeah, it so stood out that like your response to, learning from the plants and the people on the site. There's patience, there's love, there's like flexibility and resilience, and like a kind of innocent enthusiasm, which is really
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, and it's funny how, yeah, even kids who've had no experience of the land, like it's like a craving and like a recognition, like we belong, this is our mom, we belong here. And I've seen it over and over again in my work when I worked in urban agriculture. Even youth who, maybe were struggling with some behavioral issues would just kind of calm down and light up. With their hands in the soil, or kids who had a lot of struggles around eating and didn't like vegetables, but like literally stuffing carrots into their mouths from the ground because they grew them. I just love that, seeing kids with dirt on their mouth because they're just eating what they grew. So thank you for that, Emily. It was beautiful. So yeah, the next sort of set of questions are really around community building. And I was wondering, Shan, among the many wonderful community initiatives that you've seeded through Tea Garden, your lacto fermentation kitchen is particularly inspiring. So much like regenerative farming, fermentation is about working in partnership with good microbes. Fermentation reconnects us to our cultures, literally and figuratively. It nourishes us, it brings us together. It's often something people do in collaboration. So could you speak to a little bit to how growing Asian vegetables and holding fermentation workshops has been a source of growth in community for Tea Garden?
Yes, for sure. And then I'll just say one thing in response to what Emily said earlier. Our son, who is now a teenager, even during the pandemic years when they weren't able to go to school and were mostly housebound, I think like as grumpy as they may get, coming to the farm, even if they say no want to go, but as soon as they come, we have chickens, and then just touching the soil, they'll just hang out there for a long time and not get bored. I think children are by nature connected with the land, just like automatically. So yeah, thanks for that sharing as well. And then coming to the fermentation side of things, when I was telling our story about how we started in Bruce County, and our first market was the Kincardine Farmers Market, and Bruce County, the small village we lived. I'm good now, thanks.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I don't know where I was, but I was just saying how the idea of doing fermentation started.
Perfect.
Yeah, and so even though fermentation in North America has seemed to be like gaining fashion and gaining popularity in the past couple of years, it is a very old art of food preservation, elongating the season and making nutrients available during, like in our climate, the very cold times of the year. So it is an ancient art of food preservation, and also very functional. So it allows people who have limited means to get through the off season, especially still having access to all that vitamin and all that fiber in their diet. Our fermentation started in rural Ontario, where a lot of people never heard of kimchi. And now we live in Ottawa, and then still we encounter people who really say things about these lacto-fermented food. Are they healthy? Are they not, inducing cancer? Are they, are they too salty? So there are many questions around the health benefits of fermentation, as much as there is curiosity. So I grew up in Beijing. It is northeastern Asia, where the fermentation culture it shares a lot to that of Korea, Japan, Siberia. Not just vegetable, but also drinks, kombucha and kvass, and all of these really age-old technique of using what's available locally. So through doing fermentation and borrowing, like I have to interview my family members, and Lipo, who is from the mountains of southwestern China, where it borders Myanmar and Laos and Vietnam and Tibet, also can, borrow a lot of that traditional wisdom in terms of preserving food. Kale, of all the vegetables, at the farmer's market, sometimes you have a bumper crop of kale. Everybody bring kale. Everybody bring, 5 bunches and bring 4 bunches back. So it is also a way of avoiding competing with otherwise our hardworking fellow farmers, to be able to find another way of using these wonderful vegetables. We borrowed a tradition from Nepal and the mountain areas. It's called mountain kale crowd, and this is allowing like kale or a mustard green traditionally to wilt down and lose much of its moisture before you make it into a ferment. 3 bunches of kale come into 1 bottle. It is extremely nutrients dense, and it's also very functional as a nomad's food. People carry it up to the mountains and have like trail food. So you have your flavor. Those of you who like lacto fermentation will know that the process generates a lot of umami, like the savoriness that's like just can't be connected usually with vegetables, the green vegetables, but through fermentation, the microbes allow that to happen. So this is in collaboration with nature, just the same as you grow your crop, your soil microbe, and then comes into your microbe in your own body and a microbe in the air. So all of those collaboration magically allow this this kale ferment. It's also one of our best selling ferments out there, and you know, there are many fermentation books out there telling you no, kale is not good for ferments, it's not going to come out well. But I think we just need to explore a bit further and really asking, like, what do the mountain people do? What do people in the cold climate, what do they do in terms of, you know, preserving food? Really, our cultural cross-cultural learning allowed us to be curious enough. And also, when you do have a bumper crop, you don't want those food to go to waste. You go all the lengths to explore how you can make use of them. So that knowledge, when passing on to the communities, we do trainings now. I'd rather not call them trainings. I'd rather just to say sharing, and then it's both learning and teaching at the same time, because every time during those sessions, I learn something new from our community members, and people are like, yes, my mother did that, but we haven't been doing that for a long time. And then they would share some of their family stories. So I think those that is like more than just like teaching a technique, but also allowing this conversation to happen among folks who are from so many cultures. And I think in the Canadian agricultural scene, we are not allowing those conversations to happen enough, because you know, we're not our agricultural diversity does not reflect the rich cultural roots of our community, and there's so much to be done, and fermentation is only just one route.
Thank you so much. I love that. I love the idea of fermentation also being about community stories and community inheritance of such diverse backgrounds. That's beautiful. And I really want to learn how to make a mountain kale kraut. That sounds incredible. Yeah, and we're getting some requests in the chat as well. Great. Emily, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about one of the themes that came up when we chatted last week was about food as a sacred gift as opposed to a right in a lot of First Nations communities. And I was wondering how that perspective of the sacred gift of food has informed how the gardens and programming have come together at the Healing Place.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good question. So just to expand on that a little bit. So I mean, that's like a perspective that I've really learned. And so my boss, who I mentioned before, Larry McDermott, who's Algonquin from Shabatabajuan First Nation, that's something that he ever says whenever, you know, whenever he's involved in a conversation about food sovereignty or food security, because he's actually been involved in quite a few related projects, and he's often asked to speak and give his input. So anyway, that's one of the main messages that he's always wanting to get across to people, like from his perspective and from the perspective of, I think, a lot of Indigenous people, that's, you know, there's often a lot of conversations around food security and food as a right. But yeah, so from his perspective, that's what he always shares, that he sees food as a sacred gift. And I think that definitely kind of, it's maybe subtle, but I think it definitely shifts your perspective, I think, if you think of it that way. And I think it shifts the way you think about like that whole piece. And I mean, sort of reiterating what I've already said before about it being like a relationship with the land, and the food is a gift from the land, and that humans are, we're not separate from that. We're part of nature. We're part of that relationship, and like our relationship to the land, to the plants, to the animals who are also food. And so, I mean, yeah, that's definitely a foundational thing for the healing place as well. And the whole, the reconciliation and relationship parts of it, that when we're, we're putting this work into the land and our love into the land, and the gifts that the land give us back, like, yeah, those are gifts that we're in a relationship with. And same for, not relevant to the garden, but I mean, it's the same thing for animals who are food as well, that when you're, eating an animal, that their life was also a sacred gift, and that, that's all part of the relationship with the land and with humans as part of that. So yeah, I mean, I think we always see it that way when we're harvesting, when we're planting, when we're working on the land. It's yeah, it's about a relationship and giving giving to each other, and yeah, essentially anything, if you're giving it, it's a gift, right? So
Thank you, Emily. I really like the notions of reciprocity and kind of recognition that you're bringing. It's something that is often lost in our, current agricultural models that kind of dominate how we see food. And yeah, reciprocity and relationship as a kind of cornerstone of the gift understanding of food is really profound. Thank you. I'm wondering about, Shan, your understanding of the meaning and importance of food sovereignty. Emily was just talking a little bit about food sovereignty and how that's deepened or changed over the time that you've been growing food in Chi Garden and in Bruce County. And how has this understanding informed your vision and your goals? Here we are at the front end of the 2024 growing season.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'll maybe try to answer that in reverse order. At the big now already is marking the beginning of the 2024 growing season. The greenhouse at the farm is already busy with preparing the soil for seedlings, and then we're witnessing an unprecedented warmest time, warmest day of in February, maybe the warmest March, and don't know what is waiting ahead of us. It's going to be a tough year. I know farmers say that every year, but it is going to be a tough year in terms of both climate irregularity and also the economy, and not allowing a lot of people being able to access local food. So I think farmers are facing this across the board. Food sovereignty for me over the years is becoming more of an issue of not just how much, it's never how much we are able to grow, it's always how we can distribute and making them accessible. In this year, I think I just building on all of the experiences and lessons learned over the years, we're going to try to offer more sharing, teaching on food preservation, but then beyond that, like how do you use the kind of vegetables you find sometimes quite inexpensively at the farmer's market? How can you use that to nourish yourself? I think we're gonna do more of that by just using our own vegetables, but also what other farms can grow. Sometimes we don't have success growing, for example, Napa cabbage, but our fellow farmers grow them really well. So I think there needs to be a lot of cross-referencing when it comes to getting through the harder time. and avoiding food waste. A third of our food is not, ends up not being used. So how can we avoid food waste given our weather pattern? We have such a short growing season, and what can be done about that? Another kind of resolution we have is to connect with other BIPOC farmers. I was saying earlier, the agricultural community, the wonderful one that we have. A lot of times when we go to attending meetings and going to exchanges, BIPOC farmers are very not proportionally represented. People are more muted, are just, you don't find yourself represented in those space, and then you tend to go less. But I think for that exact same reason, we need to show up. We need to make connection with other BIPOC farmers. If you're a consumer at a farmer's market, please go say hi to that person who is selling a vegetable you don't recognize, you've never had before. Just go and ask those questions, like, what is that vegetable? Why do you grow it? Is it like, how do you use it? And just really broaden up. I think it is beneficial for the grower and for the consumer alike to really expand ourselves into those territories, because there's so many surprises waiting at our farm stand. We love the moments. One time we have this first perennial crop that come out every year in the spring is called garlic chive. You will find garlic chive in many of our horticulture, like in the flower space, but they are a beautiful vegetable, herb, so many uses. Our kimchi is not the same without participation of garlic chive. It grows so early, and it's, every part of the plant is usable. And one time we have several Afghanistan consumers, like the women came and they saw garlic chive. They were just so excited because they recognize as their own cultural crop. So just try to, share more and step out of your comfort zone, because I think if we all do that, it's going to get us through what's all the uncertainties ahead of us a bit better.
Thank you, Sun Shan. I really love how this theme of relationship building keeps coming up with every answer. I think it's kind of at the root of this conversation. And I also love the idea of basically enlarging your comfort zone to encompass, a much broader range of foods and conversations and community. So thank you for that. Emily, discussion's a little bit long because it's kind of summarizing some of the stuff that is that you've shared, like from the website and from this work. But I just wanted to say that many wise folks have pointed out that our food system is not broken. It's actually working very well the way it was designed, and the people who it was designed to benefit. And that points to the history and the present day of colonialism and how Indigenous food sovereignty has been deliberately destroyed. And I really encourage folks to look up the website for The Healing Place. There's some really excellent articles on there about this. So destroying Indigenous food sovereignty includes harming plants, seeds, animals, land, and water, which traditional Indigenous food systems stewarded in a very wise combination of agriculture and food production sites, trading relationships between the nations, and careful harvesting from wild lands and waters. And some of the harmful practices that continue to this day are forcing Indigenous people onto reserves, banning hunting practices, and other important food gathering practices such as wild rice also called manuman, and other important celebrations and ceremonies. So I was wondering if you could speak to the role of growing and sharing traditional foods and medicines in the healing place. The conversations around them and how you've seen some transformations happening in that space.
Yeah, so I mean, like you said, I think that's important. important history to know and context, especially if you're going to be talking about Indigenous food sovereignty. Like that's the reality of where it's at right now, that most of it was very purposefully destroyed. And yeah, I think Angel, you were looking at the probably something on the Plenty Canada site, because I know we have a pretty good page on there that kind of summarizes that pretty well. Just Indigenous food sovereignty. So I can put the link in the chat to that page afterwards as well. But yeah, so those things, like you mentioned, I mean, that's those are the results of colonization, and like something that something that everyone has to face, that Indigenous people don't have the choice but to face, but that everyone else who is on this land who's not Indigenous needs to really make a conscious effort to realize that, like, we're living right now with colonization, and like that's the reality. And it's not something that was in the past and it's been fixed now. It's something that's still very, very current. So yeah, like Indigenous food sovereignty, like I said, it's been very purposefully destroyed, like some of the examples that you mentioned, like outright banning of these practices, like banning the cultivation of wild rice, banning these any kind of cultural celebrations and ceremonies was not allowed, and a lot of those were associated with food. Banning hunting and fishing rights. Just like one example is the Williams Treaties of 1923, which were supposed to, as they were originally understood, to allow the people to hunt and fish on those lands, and the government went back on their word and decided to not let them do that. And so generations of people completely lost their connection and their ability to do that. And all of those people are still dealing with that now, and that can't be just fixed. Like that's something that everyone's living with the results of now. And so building that back is, that's there's a lot to overcome, and a lot of this is not in very it's in fairly recent history. The government put out an apology for the Williams Treaties, and the misinterpretations of it in 2018. They released an apology. So yeah, I think that's important to iterate that context. So when we're talking about building back that food sovereignty, it's not a small task. So it's more than just about having food. And I do have that site open, and I kind of just want to read it because I think it summarizes it well. Indigenous food sovereignty asserts the cultural importance of eating foods that are not only nutritious, but an essential part of cultural frameworks that include spiritual and empathic relationships. Reflecting the importance of food sovereignty to Indigenous nations, it was usually a main component in treaties negotiated with the Crown, which is why it was in that Williams Treaty, for example. And so making those reconnections, it's really it's a really big deal. It's about food, it's about reconnecting to the land, it's about connecting to culture, and like building back so many things that have been lost. So yeah, the healing place is just like a really small example of that, and like trying to provide an opportunity for that. And so having a lot of those cultural plants there, and a place that's completely open for anyone to come if they want to. It is somewhat accessible also, hopefully, by some of the urban Indigenous community in Ottawa. It's not too far away. But yeah, the idea is that, people can hopefully come to this site and like experience some of these plants and learn about them and have that hands-on relationship. And like I said, it's a fairly it's a fairly small thing. It's a small step, but but I think it's a really good example of something that can be done and something that's community led. Like Indigenous communities are, mainly the ones that are that are leading these recovery efforts, and like they, like bringing these things back to their communities. I mean, that needs to be led by them with the support, like for the things that they need. And there's a lot of that going on right now. Plenty Canada actually has a totally separate project all about that, that has had different things going on over the last few years that I haven't been as directly involved with, but we've had a project where the project coordinators have interviewed people at all kinds of different communities across Ontario and the country, actually, about the food sovereignty initiatives that they're doing, and some of the responses to the COVID-19 pandemic, and sort of evaluating like the effectiveness of those things. So anyway, my point is that there is a lot of this work going on, being led by Indigenous communities, and they should be supported to do that. And the Healing Places, I think, one great small example.
Thank you so much, Emily. I really appreciate that. It really comes across very strongly that, this is such a magnitude of a problem, but that, we have to just keep picking away at this with community-led efforts that are supported and resourced and highlighted. And it kind of brings to mind a story that you had shared, Shan, and the takeaway was you have to choose to plant the trees always. And I was wondering if you would share that story about organizing a cross-cultural agricultural tour in Bruce County some years ago.
For sure. I before the pandemic, because of my long-term role being a organizer for the East Asian diaspora growers and people who work to enhance the ecological well-being. So I have organized a couple of years study tours for folks to come to Canada during the summer months, so that they get to visit places and people who are also putting a lot of their energy into these endeavors. When one of the groups came, this was, I think, in 2016, we had a summer day to go and help out at the community garden as at one of the Sogino Ojibwe Nation communities in Bruce County. And I was telling the starting of our garden, this is a community that is very close to Bruce Power, the nuclear power plant. And at the time, it was also under the shadow, the discussion about burying nuclear waste was ongoing. So this project is called DG, the Deep Geological Repository, DGR. And the plan was to bury nuclear waste from Bruce Power, but potentially other nuclear plants deep, right a kilometer away from Lake Huron, and like right there beside our Great Lakes watershed, by drilling down into the ground. And so it is with that background that our trip was to go and visit the community and to plant some community garden, and also to gain a bit of understanding about how they are. We hired a school bus, so I get a school bus to get us to be meeting the community garden coordinator in front of the church. And 20 minutes into this waiting, I was getting a bit restless. I called the person, and they came and said, "I'm so sorry, but we originally wanted to because you come from afar, we have this corn soup and then some food prepared as we usually do before we get started to plant. But because that our community has had a very unfortunate tragic death of a young person who took their own life the day prior to our arrival, we wouldn't be able to do that. So and then a lot of our members didn't have enough language, so this had to be translated. But we still decided with that background to still go and plant trees, because the community has been so busy and their bare root seedlings of fruit trees, berry trees were really drying out, and they needed that help putting them in. So that afternoon, you know, there are 17 of us, and we planted about 200 trees in the community garden, but also knowing that there was so much suffering and so much just really hardship that's going. And my understanding is that it wasn't the first time that happened just during that 1 year. So this just speaks to the reality that some of our indigenous communities are going through. And I think, you know, even with limited language, even with that looming uncertainties with the nuclear power, the nuclear waste, and with this tragic event, we planted trees. And a couple of days later, they posted on their Facebook page about how much it means for this group of people who came from far away to have planted those trees, really saved, and otherwise the trees wouldn't have survived under that it was very intensely hot summer too. So I think that's, I mean, we should always plant trees. We should always help, and in that way to be helped, because it really changed who I am, that those visits. And at another day, and we went to another Sogino Ojibwe Nation band office, and an elder, and his name is Simon, and he led us through a grove. And Angel, you were mentioning trees, and Emily, you were commenting on all of these trees. Many of them were really having their way with our indigenous knowledge. And I there learned a tree that is so dear to my heart. Is the tree's name is trembling aspen. You know, I love all trees that has leaf shaped like a heart, and trembling aspen is one of them. What Simon shared with us is that when your heart is really troubled, and when you really don't know what to do with all the trouble in the world, you stand underneath of a trembling aspen, and they're never one. They're all connected underneath in their roots. So they're always a grove. And you stand underneath there during the summer days, and you really hear all of these hearts, because they tremble and they speak to you. And that's how you find consolence, and how you find healing. So there are so many of our non-human brothers and sisters out there who are ready to help, but we really need to learn to listen. So I think all of those experiences changed my life as a farmer. We grow vegetables, we present to you the squash, but it's like 80-90% water. So it is a sacred work that I bring water from our field to you. And it's not just the nutrients, it's connected with all other water. It's connected with the water with my trembling grove right beside our farm. So with that connectivity, I think you do get through harder times in every way, because you're never alone.
Thank you so much. I feel like there could not be a better closure to this conversation than the image of calming our trembling hearts under the trembling aspens to get reconnected to the connectivity and the knowledge that we're not alone in that working together. We can keep showing up even in the shadow of a nuclear giant, even in the shadow of profound grief and the harms of colonization. We can still choose to plant the trees and show up for each other across languages, across thousands of kilometers. There's always a way to keep going forward together. I just wanted to note that there was a great question in the chat and Emily has answered it. If people want to take a look. If you have any other questions, feel free. We still have like just about 2 minutes. Oh, here we have a question for Sun Shan. You mentioned that with this warm and dry winter, you're expecting an especially challenging growing season. What are the ways that you're planning and working through that in your garden? Are you planning to do anything differently?
Oh, thank you, Alexander. I feel like that's a question for both Libor and myself. And yeah, Libor is the main gardener, main laborer at our farm. A lot of the times, I think the resilience is through more observing more and planning less. Is that how we get through things? Even in bad weather, things grow. You just have to really be observant about what grows where and try to really mimic what nature throws it in your way with more open heart. Our garden is quite wild and it's less planned, but I think that observation and acceptance gets us through, sometimes in very unexpected ways. So I don't know if that answers your question. So this is yet another year that I think we're gonna try to keep tuning in and allowing allowing things to happen to us. Things always grow without fail, and just not how you like want to direct it the way.
Yeah, thank you. I was remembering now that your garden you use a lot of the natural seeding method with just letting what grows up from the seeds from the previous year. So that's already a good step towards resilience.
Thank you. That is a really beautiful way to close the conversation. Observation and open hearts get us through. Things always grow without fail, maybe not the way we want, but the way in which nature allows if we observe and are patient. Thank you so much. There's a little bit of conversation happening at the chat if people want to take a look. But yeah, I would really love to invite Emily and Sun Shan. Do you have any last closing words you would like to say?
I'm going to just put in the chat our contact and also a lot of wonderful initiatives that's happening at the Just Food Community Farm, including healing programs, including programs for children and nature experience programs. I'm going to put them in there. So folks, if you come, it's on the green belt and you can come and take a walk and then visit all the different wonderful organizations and initiatives that is here at the same farm space. So how do I do that? Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, so I mean, I was just gonna say, I know there's links in the chat already to the page about the healing place, so feel free to go there if you'd like to learn more about it. If you would like to visit the site, if you're in the area at all, it's open to visit at any time. Like you can just go there. You don't need you don't need permission. It is It's technically owned by South Nation Conservation, so it's a public site. I can put a link to it on Google Maps in the chat here in a second as well. If you're interested in knowing when we're having events and things happening there, on the web page that you have a link to already, you can sign up for the Plenty Canada email list just at the bottom of the website there, and you'll find out when we're having events there. We usually have a big one in the fall for harvest, like I said. And also, if you're interested in, maybe getting more involved, we're trying to get a little bit better and more organized for having sort of maintenance throughout the summer, just like weeding and things like that. So I'll put my email in the chat as well, so you can feel free to reach out to me if you're kind of interested in maybe being more involved like that, because it'll be easier to just talk over email if you want to do something like that. But yeah, like I said, you can also feel free to just go visit the site if you want to do that as well. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and thanks for having me.
Emily, I think you have to have a parsnip pulling party, triple P, because especially after a rain, like my husband and I, we've removed so much poison parsnip from our property after a rain. That's how to do it. We are like pros now. So we would come, I was going to say roll up our sleeves. No, roll down your sleeve so you don't get burned.
Yeah, I was going to say, bring your gloves.
Bring your gloves, bring your long sleeves. But yeah, we will come. And anyone who wants to roll up, bring snacks. I would love to help. Thank you.